Hi, my name's Keith Cooper, and in this video I'm going to have a look at a matte paper I was sent to have a look at. Now, what's unusual about this paper, apart from the type of paper it is that it was sent to me from Red River Paper in the States to have a look at. And I did a review of a couple of other papers that did, and they just sent me this one as a what do you think of it type thing. Now, this is £60, so there's a measurement system that's just simply not used outside the US. Paper canvas 230, it's 230 grams per metre. It's quite a lightweight, it's a bright white canvas finish paper. It's quite a nice, there's a distinct texture to the surface, and it's a bright white paper. Now, I've had a look on this at the using the P5000 here, which is a pigment ink printer, and the Epson one there, and the Canon Pro 200, which is currently about the best dye-based printer that's out there. For some reason, the manufacturers, both Canon and Epson, have decided that high-end printers with dye inks are not somewhere they want to go. Turns out you can do some quite nice results. Now, as part of any testing of paper, I look at the specs here, and we've got it, it's 230 grams. It's suggested media settings. Always, if you get a paper, look for the info like this. If a paper supplier doesn't supply you information like this, and I know plenty in the UK that do, then take that as a hint that they're not necessarily so serious about supporting you and giving good results. Now here it gives Epson print settings, use it, and suggested media settings. Now the media settings is enhanced matte, as typical on the matte on here, and it's the photo matte, or it varies by name on the Canon one here, but it's a matte paper setting. Now I have made some profiles for this, and that's what these two sheets here are for. Here is the profile test sheet created on the P5000, and here is the one created on the Pro 200. And I'm hoping that even under this lighting, it should be quite obvious that there is a much deeper intensity of colour on the dye inks on this paper than there is here. Now, that doesn't mean I can't produce good looking prints on the P5000 with it. It works very well. It just means that this is one of those papers that just gives you a little bit more depth, and the blacks are blacker on the dyes here. The darker, the D-Max figure is more on here than it is on that. Now, doesn't mean you won't get good prints here. You will just get prints a little darker, if well profiled, and they'll look a bit more depth to them, a bit more contrast here on the dye-based inks. Now this is very similar to how some papers vary on the Epson 8550, which I discovered that because of the mixed ink set there, it's very dependent on profiling, and some papers give much better looking prints on the 8550 than others, seemingly quite similar papers, particularly on art papers. So always worth remembering that you get your printer first and then you choose what papers work with it. If you just pick a paper first and then say, right, I like this paper, I'm going to use it on a printer, you can sometimes get problems because not every paper works the same on every printer. There are variations in them. There are variations in the papers as well. Now this one, as I say, relatively thin. It has a thin, it says canvas, it's a textured pattern to it. It's a bright paper. So I made some profiles, and the profiles, if anyone wants to drop me an email at Northlake Images, yeah, I can happily send you the profiles for it. I don't put them online for licensing issues, but they're available if anyone wants to use them for non-commercial use. They're available. Now, prints that I made. For matte images like this, black and white is not necessarily that great on here. It does work well on the P5000. Here it's very much dependent on getting a good profile. This is not a paper I'd necessarily pick for black and white, because with the optical brightener that's in it, so it's not really an archival paper. It's quite a lot of optical brightener. It's a bright paper. Depending on what lighting you've got, it will take on a slightly different look. Now for colour that doesn't make much difference, but for black and white it gives colour cast. So you're much more likely under different types of lighting to get colour casts here on the dye inks if it's printing black and white. On colour doesn't really matter. Now, this is the sort of image that I always expect to work well on matte papers. This is a view. This was a very misty sunset at Cannon Beach in Oregon a few years ago, just after sunset, just with a lovely soft colour everywhere. Stuff like that works well on matte papers like this. Not all images. If you've got an image that relies on strong, vibrant colours, then yeah, you may have difficulties. Have a look. I always go back to the profiling chart. If the sort of colours I want are not present on the profiling chart, they're not going to be present in the image. That's the whole point of why you do the profiling. But there are some quite strong colours available here, so yeah, it should work well. It's a paper that you'll pick because you like the brightness of it, and you like the surface texture. Now, surface texture I'm very ambivalent about. I do not like highly textured papers. I tend to produce for art papers. I tend to much prefer very light textures or smooth papers, so the image does the work. If you want the look from a texture, then well, by all means go for it. But this is a nice basic paper. What about anything a bit more colourful? Well, here's another image. I'll just select it on here. This is Ely Cathedral. Now that is a picture that prints very well. I wouldn't do a black and white one of this. As I say, this is not a paper and printer I'd pick for black and white. That's on a luster paper there. That's done on a much bigger printer, bigger than this one even. But I've got a nice set of colours which I think work quite well. It's not too bright. The fact that it's stonework and the colour comes from the lighting, there's a little bit of colour from some stained glass, but that's Ely Cathedral and that one works well. So I've got a couple of nice prints there that work well with this paper. Is it a paper I would have tried otherwise? Probably not. So it's just one of those things that I go, that's not bad. I'll put this one aside. And there may come an image at some point I want to print and I think, that paper will do for it. Don't go overboard in just trying every single different paper you come across, getting sample packs and things like that. Unless you've done a lot of testing of papers, you will end up with just lots of sample prints and you'll never probably be able to make your mind up. Deciding on papers is a tricky thing. I get a lot of papers to test and I still have half a dozen go-to papers that I will pick, ones that I've used for perhaps 10-15 years. I've got some newer papers in it as well, but 10-15 years that I'm happy with. I know what the results are. But if you want something a bit different, and so it's a relatively lightweight paper, 230 gram, £60, have a look at this one. Red River do support in the way of profiles and all kinds of stuff, so thanks for sending this one, quite interesting. And as I say, it makes a change from all the papers I get sent from the UK, and I haven't actually seen anyone in the UK produce a paper that looks like this one. I'll have to look around and see what's available. Anyway, I hope these sort of short reviews of papers and the like are of help. Please do ask questions if you like. I'm quite happy to look at that. And people's questions often give me ideas for other videos. So there you go. Some not bad prints. Thanks for watching. Cheers.